Welcome back to everybody. Anna, would you like to chair the session, the new session? Because it's 45 right now.
Yes, of course, Ergun.
Yeah, please. It's your turn, please. Thank you.
So we begin the second session of this conference. And of course, before we begin, I would like to ask all the participants to stick with the table. And first is Angeliki with the presentation about the ivory in the Aegean Bronze Age. So please, Angeliki.
Yes, how can I share my presentation? I have forgotten.
Also, Angelike, es ist sehr einfach. Was du machen sollst, ist einfach mal halt deine PowerPoint in Files zu finden und einfach mal halt in Screenshare mal halt klicken, das ist alles.
Can you see?
Nein, noch nicht. Noch nicht. Das ist gar kein Problem, wir haben Zeit. Wenn du mir das senden könntest, könnte ich das auch öffnen, wenn du möchtest.
Moment, wie?
Das ist kein Problem, mach keine Sorge, bitte. Wir haben Zeit.
Ja, aber wie kann ich das sharen? Das ist...
Also, wenn du mir dies senden könntest, hätte ich das schon für dich arrangieren. Also,
ja,
ja?
Moment. Ich habe mein PowerPoint. Can you see it?
Noch nicht, also.
Ja, aber... was kann ich drücken?
Einfach mal halt Screenshare zu drücken. Aber wie gesagt...
Wo ist die... Moment, wo ich sehe das nicht.
Also auf Griechisch sollte es, wie sollte man das doch nennen? Screenshare.
Mein Gott, ich habe es vergessen.
Ja, ich habe es mal gefunden. Also so ist es heißen. Also so ist es heißen. Diamormos Athonis, glaube ich, oder?
Othoni. Na ja, aber das ist... Mein Gott.
Also du kannst mir das auch mal halt senden, wenn du möchtest.
Ja, Moment, ich soll es finden, more.
Where are you going for a second? Right now.
So steht nicht.
Also auf dem griechischen Tastatur steht es dann so. Diamormos Athonis. I guess.
Ja, Mirasmus, aber es steht nicht in meinem Computer. Oh mein Gott, was für Problem?
That's not a problem at all.
Mirasmus Athonis. Stop video. Wo ist das? Unten.
Ich denke, es muss in der Mitte stehen, denke ich mir. Ich schicke dir das. Erst. Oder.
Gott ist anders als in andere Konferenzen.
Moment mal, ich zeig dir. Einfach Angeliki. Hier soll es dann stehen. Hier, diese Tastatur.
Ach, hier, es gibt nicht diese Tastatur.
Ach so, bei dir nicht?
Nein.
Das ist gar kein Problem. Kannst du
Moment.
vielleicht so machen? Kannst du einfach mal so sprechen, wenn du möchtest? Kannst du mal einfach so lesen? Und ich kann deine Bild halt hier zeigen. Wir haben ja hier von dir ein Bild. Ich kann das dann mal halt zeigen. Das ist gar kein Problem. Einfach mal sprich weiter.
Ja, aber wieso gibt es nicht bei mir?
Ja, das können wir später mal diskutieren. Du kannst vielleicht mal jetzt anfangen, wenn du möchtest.
Naja. In the Bronze Age, the Aegeans, first the Minoans and then the Mycenaeans, used the elephant and the hippopotamus ivory for constructing various artifacts, such as seals, small idols, cosmetic utensils, musical instruments, etc., and for decorating as inlays, wooden furniture, handles for weapons, symbols of prestige, and other luxury items. In antiquity, as today, ivory held an enormous allure. It was an exotic material whose relative rarity increased its value. Yet, it was quite easy to carve, durable, and visually appealing. The provenance of the raw material itself is a matter for debate among scholars. It could have come through Syria or through Egypt, or even both. The provenance could have varied in the different periods of the Bronze Age. The Minoans imported ivory in the form of tusks or teeth from elephants and hippos from Syria, Palestine, and North Africa, mainly from Egypt and possibly from Libya. They imported ivory from before the end of the third millennium until the end of the Bronze Age, around 1100 BC. The Minoans and later the Mycenaeans' commercial and artistic contacts with these regions are confirmed by archaeological finds. For instance, the frescoes of the tomb of Rechmire, who was vizier of Pharaoh Thutmose III, confirm contacts between the Aegean world and Egypt. These frescoes depict foreigners called Keftiu who were identified usually with Cretans, bearing tributes to the pharaoh to Egypt, included elephant tusks and bronze ingots. Furthermore, a large number of Minoan artistic works, for example, seals, frescoes, idols, etc., show Egyptian influence in their iconography. Regarding trade exchange with the Near East, the existence of elephant heads in Syria during the late Minoan to late Helladic III period is attested textually. Trade relations between Syria and Crete are indicated by the 3 elephant tusks, other scholars report 4 or 6, that were discovered by Nikolaos Platon in the west wing of the Chakros Palace in eastern Crete, along with 6 bronze ingots. According to the excavator, these tusks come from a specific species of a small elephant that was common in Syria at that time. Raw ivory is also included in the palace inventories of Pylos in Messenia, in the southern Peloponnese, which are written in the linear B script. The finds of the Uluburun shipwreck on the southwestern coast of Turkey, which are dated to the late Bronze Age, are very important. The ship carried from the eastern Mediterranean, Canaan and Phoenician, to Aegean or Greek mainland a great variety of goods, such as ebony, gold, glass ingots, e.g. cobalt blue or turquoise, and metal, copper and tin ingots, processed and unprocessed ivory from hippos and elephants, etc. Regarding the ivory pieces, the excavator Pulak mentions 14 hippopotamus teeth, 1 partial large elephant tusk, an ivory horn, an ivory scepter, duck-shaped ivory cosmetic containers, etc. The cargo of the Uluburun ship demonstrates the simultaneous flow of raw materials and manufactured goods from the Levantine coast and Cyprus into the Aegean. Furthermore, Syro-Babylonian cylinder seals, which were unearthed in Crete, also support the existence of trade contacts between Crete and the Near East. I will present you a selection of Minoan ivory artifacts, but unfortunately I can. In Crete, hippopotamus ivory was used initially for the manufacture of seals, which are dated from the early Minoan III to the middle Minoan I period. Many of these items were found in South Crete. Early ivory seals have distinctive shapes. They are mainly double-faced seal cylinders with representations of marching lions or spirals, or multifaceted prisms and cubes, or animal-like figures such as e.g. monkeys, apes, birds, flies, and dogs. Well, either we can see some of these seals and pendants. 3 seals in the shape of seated monkeys are visible, originated from various locations in southern Crete, Lassithi and Messara plain. 2 pendants, also in the shape of monkeys, are presented. 2 monkeys sitting back to back from Messara, and another pendant that was found in the Fourni cemetery at Archanes. The next examples come also from Archanes, a very important archaeological site, and only one from Platanos in southern Crete. You can see a seal-shaped like a fly and another like a seated dog. cylindrical surface of one seal is decorated with leaves, while the round one bears scorpions motifs. The Minoans used seals for practical purposes, but they also wore them as amulets or pendants. Most of the seals were found in graves, and this suggests that they also had a prophylactic apotropaic meaning. Some examples are inscribed. It is worth noting that Minoan hieroglyphic writing appears on some of the later of these early Cretan ivory seals from Agia Triada and from Archanes, dating to the Middle Minoan 1A period. The unique 14-sided seal from Archanes is a very good example. I agree with Paul Richak and John Younger that probably the shape and function of early Cretan seals are directly related to the trade processes that brought ivory to the Aegean. This hypothesis is also supported by the Syrian-Babylonian seals found in Crete. I can also agree with Ingopini's view that since a large number of early Minoan seals have been found in the south of the island, it is possible that one or more workshops for their manufacture in various materials existed in this area, namely in the Messara Valley near the Asterousia Mountains. Ivory human figures are rare in the pre-Palatial period. We see a unique figurine with folded arms from the Furni cemetery in Archanes. Its shape imitates that of early Cycladic figurines, and for this reason, its excavator, Yannis Akelerakis, considers it to be the work of a Cycladic artist who lived in Crete. From the waist to the upper thighs, there are holes for inserting inlays of other material. Since this pattern extends over both hips, it must represent a patterned garment. When the first palaces were constructed in Crete in the Middle Minoan 1B period, and when the linear A script evolved into an administrative tool at Knossos in the Middle Minoan 2A period, no ivories are attested according to Richard Younger, or ivory objects were rare according to Purcell. Some finds from this period come from Malia, showing Eastern artistic influences, especially from Anatolia and Byblos in Syria, as do other finds from this site. During the Neopalatial or late Minoan period, new iconographic themes such as sphinxes, animal scenes, lions, bulls, wild goats, and new objects, cosmetic utensils such as pyxides, combs, mirror handles, furniture, etc. appear. This was a result of Mycenaean influence and international trade. Minoan and Mycenaean motifs with Eastern elements are also noted. We observe that the number of human figures increases. A magnificent figurine from the Knossos Palace represents a male bull leaper, part of a chryselephantine composition of bull leaping, Taurocathapsia, which is missing. From the same group, several small chryselephantine heads of bull leapers survived, and the bull's heads in fragments of faience and gold. The young athlete is depicted suspended in the air while performing the amazing leap. This is a masterpiece of Minoan art. Most depictions of bull leaping in wall paintings and wall reliefs in miniature sculpture, seals, and seal impressions come from the Knossos Palace and the surrounding area. This perhaps indicates that this impressive sport was a special medium of promoting the power of the palatial elite. The same topic, with a bull leaping scene combined with a capture of the bull, decorates an ivory pyxis from Katsaba, the port of Knossos. A capture of the bull can also be seen on the magnificent gold cup of Aphios in the National Archaeological Museum of Athens. Numerous objects were made to be used as inlays for wooden furniture. However, complete pieces of furniture decorated with ivory have not yet been found. Linear B tablets from Knossos and Pylos do mention ivory inlays and fittings for the construction of furniture or chariots. It is also worth noting that workshops in Mycenae, at the House of the Shields and at the House of the Sphinx, made furniture. yeah. I wanted to show you some examples, but yeah. Ivory sculpture from elephant tusks developed during the late Minoan or Neopalacial period, following the construction of the second palaces in Crete, the conquest of Minoan Crete by the Mycenaeans. Probably the great palaces controlled both the import of raw materials at the workshops that produced the final works. The artists were also royal craftsmen. Some workshops have been identified while others are hypothetical. At Knossos, important workshop areas have been identified along the north and the south sides of the Royal Road. Many unfinished ivory pieces were found by the British excavators. Another workshop for ivory, faience, and rock crystals was discovered in the south wing of the Chakros Palace. In other Minoan sites, probably other ivory workshops operated as well, such as at Archanes and at Palekastro, since worked ivories have been found at both sites. On the mainland, 3 ivory workshops on the Acropolis of Mycenae are certain. The so-called Artists' Workshop, the House of Shields, and the House of Sphinxes. According to Tournavitu, a small number of 22 pieces were also recorded in the oil merchant's house. The same scholar mentions that at Mycenae, the total number of ivories recorded was well over 18,700 pieces, an impressive number by any calculation, a unique collection of worked ivory unmatched at any other site or establishment. Ivory workshops could also be found in Argos and Pylos in the Peloponnese, in Sparta in Attica and Thebes in central Greece, as well as in Mycenaean centers in Cyprus, such as Engomi, Kitio, and Paphos. It is worth noting that ivory is combined with other materials, such as gold, faience, and rock crystals, and this procedure could have taken place in the same workshop. In conclusion, we observe the following. A wide variety of Minoan and Mycenaean ivory objects were manufactured in many Bronze Age centers in Greece. They use iconography and style following the time trends. Ivory workshops existed in various locations in Crete, in the Peloponnese, in central Greece, and in Cyprus. The workshops were controlled by local kings and were usually located in or near the palaces. Many artifacts are masterpieces of miniature art exhibiting the skills of their creators. However, we cannot say more about their identity. Minoan and Mycenaean ivory objects show many Eastern elements from the Near East and Egypt as a result of the trade of that period. In addition, they were also exported to the Eastern Mediterranean, or the ivory art of the Aegean influenced the ivory objects of the Eastern Mediterranean. Therefore, a continuous and intensive exchange of raw materials, processed goods, techniques, and ideas was conducted. Thus, because of this movement of influences in ivory sculpture, some scholars, such as Paul Richak and John Younger, speak of international styles in ivory sculpture during the Aegean Bronze Age. Ivory carving in the Aegean area began late and ended early. As palace art technique disappeared around 1200 BCE, along with the destruction of the Mycenaean palaces. Later, during the geometric and orientalizing periods, ivory was reintroduced to Crete from the east. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angeliki. It was a very wonderful presentation.
Yeah, unfortunately, I could not show you the pictures.
Don't you worry. It's okay. So now we will have second presentation, and if you have, of course, question for Angeliki, you will have to wait until the final, because we have just time for questions. But now I will ask our colleague from Milan, Chiara Bianchi, who is going to present us Alexandrian bone counters, finds, and interpretation. Chiara, please.
Yes. Okay.
Πώς είναι ρε παιδιά αυτό το
Do you
πράγμα?
see my screens? It's okay?
Yes, we can
Okay.
see it.
Okay.
Γιατί δεν είναι αυτό να ξέρω?
Okay.
You can start.
Okay.
Yes, good.
In this paper, I would like to address again the topic of so-called Alexandrian counters, analyzing the find in archaeological context and the hypothesis on their function. First of all, I will briefly summarize the main features of these peculiar and problematic objects. Alexandrian counters are discoid in shape and are made of bone or ivory. On the obverse side, various scenes are found. On the reverse, numerals in Latin and Greek from 1 to 15 are present. Sometimes in the middle, an inscription in Greek identifies the subject. Here are the numerals. They were considered to be of Alexandrian origins because the scene engraved often feature monument, place of cult, or landscape with crocodiles and obelisks connected to the city of Alexandria and to the Nile Delta, like, for example, Nicopolis, Canopus, Eleusinion, Uamon. Actually, many other images were found. Gods from the Egyptian and the Greco-Roman pantheon, Horus, Anubis, Thoth, Zeus, Isis, Muses, but also portraits of Roman politicians and emperors. From the Julio-Claudian dynasty, for instance, Julius Caesar, Augustus, Tiberius, Nero, and also a member of the late Ptolemaic dynasty. The inscription in Greek is Adelphos Cleopatra's brother, probably Ptolemy XIV. But there are also heroes, poets, athletes, caricature of prostitute, theatrical mask, athletic victory wreaths, along with animals, plants, and everyday objects. There is also a particular group of counters on the obverse, hands with fingers in various positions that indicate a specific number, so-called finger numbers. On the reverse, there are the corresponding numerals, almost always only in Latin, sometimes combined with the number in Greek. Only in this peculiar group of pieces, the numeral engraved on the reverse is also revealed on the obverse. And finally, there is a group of simpler counters that have a close but not entirely clear relationship with Alexandrian counters. Counters without images on the obverse, but only circular groove. On the reverse, there are the usual numbers from 1 to 15 in Latin and Greek. Alexandrian counters can be dated between around the Caesarian period to the end of the Julio-Claudian dynasty with Nero, conventionally between 45 BC and 68 AD. Some pieces continue to be used for quite a while, and at least until the first half of the 2nd century AD. These pieces have been discovered throughout the Roman world, in Egypt, along the coast of the Eastern Mediterranean, along the northern shore of the Black Sea, in Italy, and as far away off as Central Europe. Most of these counters were recovered in the past by private collectors and are unfortunately without data about the place of discovery. Exemplary is the case of the important collection formed by Wilhelm Frohner, August Kessner, and Jules Sambon. However, there are also many counters found during excavations in tombs and settlements. I am preparing a corpus and a distribution map of this find. It is still work in progress, and I apologize for the counters that I may have forgotten. Many counters were found in Egypt, mostly in Alexandria and its surroundings, but also in Damanhur, Oxyrhynchus, Tunis, and in the Fayum region. Counters from Greece were found in Athens, Rhodes, Corinth, Assos, Dion, Thessaloniki, and Knossos. In the Near East area, several counters were found in Palestine, Israel, in Jerusalem, Tel Dor, Askelon, and Caesarea Marittima, in Lebanon, in Beirut, in Syria, in Hama, Amrit, Tartus, in Turkey, in Antiochia, Tarsus, Izmir. I'm sure that I may have forgotten many counters. Several counters were found along the northern shore of the Black Sea in Tiras, Olbia Pontica, Kerch, Artesian Site, Chersonesos, Phanagoria. Many counters were found in southern and central Italy, in Pompeii, Herculaneum, Capua, Pozzuoli, Brindisi, Taranto, Roma, and Bolsena. In northern Italy, in Verona, Claterna, Cremona, and Aquileia. In Croatia, in Zadar and Vis. In southern France, in Fréjus et Vaison-la-Romaine. In Spain, in Badalona. North of the Alps, in Switzerland, in Vindonissa e Lausanne-Vidi, in Austria, in Lauriacum. These objects are now considered gaming pieces, but to tell the truth, we do not really know how the game was played. It is not mentioned in ancient sources, and all interpretations are up to questioning. For a long time, during the 19th century, these objects were mostly considered to be theater tickets. Among the first counters discovered in Pompeii, there is a piece with the inscription Aeschylus that was considered a reference to the Greek poet Aeschylus, author of tragedies. Another image and description, Hemikyklia, was interpreted as the cavea of an ancient theater. So these pieces were considered a sort of ticket to enter the theater, and the numerals on the reverse, the indication of the seats. Yet, these pieces were never found in theater excavation, and the numerals do not correspond to the number of the theater seat. Later archaeological finds, mostly engraved, have been more useful to clarify the true nature of this object. In 1886 in Rudie, a complete set of 15 counters was found in an infant cremation burial, but of the simpler type, with only circular groove on the obverse and with numerals from 1 to 15 in Latin and Greek on the reverse. Only at the beginning of the last century, a new important discovery published by Mikhail Rostovtsev changed completely the previous theory. In 1903, an infant grave was found in Kerch. A wooden box near the head of the skeleton contained a complete set of 15 Alexandrian counters, numbered from 1 to 15. In this complete set, there are rather homogeneous subjects, 10 gods or heroes, 2 portraits, 2 victory wreaths, 1 building. So 1 Augustus, in Greek Sebastos. Okay. According to Rostovtsev, the pieces belong to a board game with counters numbered from 1 to 15, and the game was probably created in Alexandria in Egypt. This interpretation was generally accepted, even though the nature of the game remained unknown. We had to wait until the 70s of the last century to have a new complete study of Alexandrian counters by Elisabeth Alfoldi Rosenbaum. According to Alfoldi Rosenbaum, the Alexandrian pieces were game pieces but used in a game without a board. I am still uncertain whether the full publication of all the material known to me will clarify the nature of the game. What seems to be certain, however, is that these counters do not belong to a board game of any kind, such as la Truncoli, Duodecim Scritta. In fact, the set of the 15 Alexandrian counters found in tomb is present in single copy and seems to be a personal property to be used in competition with players who in turn had their own set of 15 pieces. On the contrary, the counter used on board games, tabule illusorie, are found with the two different sets used by two players. For example, with counters in different colors, 15 black and 15 white, and so on. In 1975, Alfoldi Rosenbaum wrote, "We may assume that there were series of 15 counters, each for every subject shown on the obverse. In this case, the objective of the game may have been to assemble a certain combination of counters. For example, 15 counters with Zeus or Athena or all divinity with number 1 and so on. This interpretation links more likely Alexandrian counter to gambling matches with drawing lots so as to obtain a complete series with a number from 1 to 15 or a complete set of pieces with similar subject. I would like now to present some other set of pieces found in grave to add new data to the discussion. First case, two sets composed by counters with images belonging to the same class of subject. In a tomb in Tortosa, 12 counters were found. On the obverse, they feature different caricatures of old women. On the reverse, numeral from 1 to 15 and description with ironic appellation. In a grave in Zadar, 7 Alexandrian counters. On the obverse, Cupids in various positions with one Aphrodite were featured. Another completely different case, a set composed by counters of many different types. In Brindisi, a set of counters was found in a cremation grave of the 1st century AD, composed by counters of different types. But a sequence of numerals from 1 to 15 is strictly respected without duplicate numbers. There are 2 Alexandrian counters. The first with a basket, the second one with a hand showing a finger number. But also 11 counters of the simpler type are included in the set, decorated only with circular grooves on the obverse and the numeral in Latin and Greek on the reverse. And finally, a counter of a completely different type, a shell-shaped counter with the number 5 only in Latin, is used to complete the series from 1 to 15. So, most likely, the game was made up of a series of 15 counters with similar subject on the obverse. For example, 15 different gods, 15 different caricatures, 15 different Cupid, and so on. But the complexity of some set, for example, the set from Brindisi and from Kerch, attests to a later rearrangement and mixing of subject and type and loss of some counters. The set of 15 counters found in Kerch was made up of pieces probably owned by a child at the time of his premature death. In the set, there are 10 heads of gods or heroes. In this case, we can wonder if the set was originally composed of 15 heads of gods, some of which were later lost during the games and replaced by other counters with different subjects, but always maintain the series with numerals from 1 to 15. Or on the contrary, it could be a random group of 15 counters with mixed subject, later partially recomposed in an ordered series with similar subject, for example, heads of gods, through winding or exchanges. For now, these are just open questions. To conclude, just some idea on the cultural context in which these objects with bilingual inscription were made and used. So-called Alexandrian counter are an expression of the Greek, Hellenistic, Egyptian koine in the crucial moment of transition to the Roman Empire. We can assume that they were used in a playful activity codified at a given historical moment by a rich and cultural elite able to understand the complex references to Alexandrian monument and landscape and to the Roman system of political power. Later, these objects spread throughout the Roman Empire and they were adopted by wider social group, perhaps with a simplification of the representation, a partial disappearance of description, and a mix of type. Some articles about this topic are available. Just write me and I will send you the PDF. And to my thanks, I wish to add an appeal. I will be grateful for any information about the location of further bone and ivory counter of the kind described here. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Chiara, for this wonderful presentation. And now we're back to Angeliki with her
Yes,
second
but
presentation.
unfortunately I have the same problem.
Yes, but Angeliki, you could,
Yes.
du kannst deine PowerPoint mir senden, damit ich das mal zeigen kann.
Ja, Moment.
Yes, probably it's better to send the PDF or the presentation
Ja.
to Ergun.
Also jetzt habe ich ein Bild von dir, wenn es...
Ja, Moment,
Ja?
ich sende es.
Möchtest du vielleicht einfach mal anfangen zu lesen, Angeliki, damit wir die Zeit halt...
Ja.
es geht? Danke sehr, vielen Dank.
Dan, thank you for the invitation to present the second topic. I am triste about this problem. In the topic is about parva munera, representations of public spectacles on Roman and early Byzantine bone objects. In the Roman and early Byzantine periods, public spectacles were very popular, especially gladiatorial combats, wild animal hunts or fights, munera venationes, chariot races, ludi circenses, and theatrical performances, ludi scenici. These spectacles were performed in public spaces or buildings, such as in amphitheatres, hippodromes, circuses, and theatres. Scenes from these spectacles or individual performers have been depicted in various art forms, e.g. mosaics, frescoes, and reliefs, included ivory objects. This paper represents representations of public spectacles on various bone objects, focusing on gladiatorial fights, wild best hunts, chariot races, and theatrical scenes. These popular spectacles are visible on ivory artifacts, e.g. knife handles, figurines, pyxides, popular consular and imperial diptychs. These small luxury objects were mostly offered as honorific gifts, munera parva, or they are souvenirs of a performance. This paper aims to classify the selected objects chronologically according to the game that they represent. We start with gladiatorial combats and associated bone objects. The gladiator's knife or sword handles were often made of bone or ivory. The weapon's typus was similar with that used by the gladiator. However, in real combat, the gladiators must have used sharp metal knives or swords with simple metal, bone, or wooden handle. Various types of bone knives and swords handles are preserved. from simple ones or with notches for each finger to more complex in the form of a statuette. In the first categories belong these examples from Pompeii. Above are two dagger-like short swords with bone handles used by most gladiator groups in the post-Augustan period. Below, two swords, gladi of the Pompei type with scabbard are visible. They correspond to the usual military type of the second half of the 1st century CE. In the second sword, the notches are visible. The second image shows a short sword of Greek type with undecorated bone handle, also from Pompeii, exhibited in the Naples National Archaeological Museum. The third image illustrates a wooden practice sword, rudis. It is the Sika of a Thrax, which was found in the Augustan legionary camp of Oberaden in Germany. Numerous gladiator figurines like bone handles are preserved, depicting various types of gladiators, usually a single one, more rarely a pair of gladiators. Each gladiator wears the usual gladiator clothes, a loin cloth with girdle, a helmet, and carries his weapon, usually a short sword, straight or carved, and a small shield, rectangular, square, or circular. We can see some examples. The first bone figurine was found in Colchester, and it is dated in the 1st to 2nd century BC. It depicts a gladiator of the Murmillo class. His upper body is naked, but he wears a loin cloth and a reinforced belt. He is armed with a large visored helmet, a short sword, a carved rectangular shield, metal greaves, and a heavy guard on his arm holding the sword. A scene of gladiatorial combat is carved on the shield. The second ivory figurine of a gladiator is said to be from Narbonne in France, dated in the 1st to 2nd century CE. He is equipped with the above-mentioned weapons. His large helmet, a sword, and his large rectangular shield that covers the entire front of his body are particularly impressive. The third ivory gladiator figurine from Rome is in the shape of a Thrax, i.e. armed in Thracian style. The gladiator wears a helmet of the Berlin subtype with a huge graphene head bust. The name Senilus is engraved on the parmula of his shield. The next two statuettes are located in the Remus Germanicus Museum of Cologne. They are representing other gladiators types, I think secutor types. The next example shows a gladiator combat, i.e. a secutor and a retiarius in a scuffle. Gladiator figures decorate other objects of bone, such as the Hoplomachus type on a bone pyxis from the 1st or 2nd century CE. The hands, venationes, consisting of the slaughtering of exotic animals, were staged at circuses and amphitheatres by wealthy citizens to entertain the public and hosted mainly on their accession to office or the celebration of an important festival. These scenes are represented in ivory objects as well, including diptychs and pyxis. The first example shows a deer hunter that decorates a leaf of a diptych originated perhaps in Rome or northern Italy. It was produced about late 4th or early 5th century CE, and it is exhibited in the National Museum of Liverpool. The upper quarter of the relief on this piece, once the left side leaf of a diptych, depicts three officials, magistrati, representing in equal height, seated behind azure marble slabs of an ornate balustrade in the central balcony of the building that housed the event, perhaps the Colosseum in Rome. One of the officials holds the napkin, mappa, to signal the start of the game. The lower two thirds of the leaf is dedicated to the hunt that takes place in the arena of the amphitheatre. The second diptych in Louvre is uninscribed, dating in about 400 CE. It depicts perhaps a questor or praetor, but not a consul. It commemorates the games of his magistrates, showing a hunt or fights between people and bears. Due to the shape of his crown, the official has been identified with a priest of the imperial cult. A lion hunt or a lion fight in amphitheatre circus decorates the next example. An ivory diptych, perhaps from Rome, dated perhaps in the second half of the 5th century CE, now housed in the State Hermitage Museum. It is uncertain whether this diptych is an official one because no dignitaries are depicted, but only groups of people and animals cover the entire surface of the diptych plates like a pattern. In the next two ivory consular diptychs, the circus scenes are placed in the lower part in miniature size under the seated consul. The first example on the left is from the Areobindus consular diptych. He was consul in the East in 506 and husband of the Princess Juliana Anicia. Here, the enthroned consul is accompanied by two dignitaries. The spectators amuse themselves by watching different animals fight with each other and with people: horses, bears, lions, devouring bulls, etc. In the second example on the right, the scene decorates the right loaf of Anastasius Diptych, who was consul in 517. He was the nephew of the homonymous emperor. Spectators watching hunt or fights of lions in the circus or hippodrome's arena with hunters on foot or on horseback. Both diptychs are produced in Constantinopolitan workshops. Horse or chariot races at the hippodrome were very popular spectacles as well. The lower part of a series of consular diptychs created in honor of the consul Anastasios is divided into horizontal registers with scenes from the festivities celebrating Anastasius' accession to the office. We present the one in Paris, as mentioned above, and in London. In the latter version, the lower right part is broken. On the top, women lead horses, alluding to circus races, and carry cross-inscribed standards, rare Christian symbols on such traditionally secular objects. In the register below, two scenes from an unidentified farce are represented as well as we will see later. Two other examples are decorated with chariot races. The left plate of the Labadi or Labadius diptych, early 5th century CE in Brescia, and the rear leaf of the Basilius consular diptych in Milan and Florence. In the first example, four quadrigas driven by their charioteers race around the turn of the race course. In the second example, below the standing consul Basilius and the personification of Rome, a circus race, also for quadrigas, is depicted, held when Basilius took office. The two men on the right could be identified as an official and a slave. Occasionally, on the lower part of a diptych, money bags and palm branches are placed below the official feats, which he would offer to the winners after the end of the race. For instance, in the first ivory diptych of the consul Bethius in Brescia, and in the next examples, on the diptychs of the consul Clementinus of Constantinople, the consul in the west Rufius Gennadius Probus Orestes, and of the consul Justinus of Constantinople. A scene is added that shows two young slaves in short tunics on the floor of the arena, who pour out coins from leather sacks, as this image. Scattered among the coins are pieces of silver-plated palms given as prizes at the races and other competitions sponsored by the oncoming consul. On the lower frieze of the left plate of the Anastasius consular diptych is placed a scene which includes actors. Another fragmentary ivory plate from Egypt in Berlin represents a pantomime actress. She holds a lyre with her left hand and three small theatrical masks with her right. She wears a helmet like a hat, while a sword is visible below or near the lyre. This scene shows an anachronism, as in this period, masks are no longer used in theatre. Women also perform, whereas in ancient theatre, men played all the roles. Facial expressions, including grimacing, have become part of acting. Thus, the theatrical genre of mime and pantomime developed, using themes from mythology or the daily life. In summary, we observed the representations from the most popular public spectacles that decorated luxurious objects made of bone or ivory, knives handles, figurines, pyxides, and diptychs. They were created in various workshops in Western and Eastern of the Roman and the early Byzantine Empire. Such objects indicate the social and economic status of their owners. Regarding their creators, the objects must have been manufactured in various workshops in the East and the West, Rome, Constantinople, Milan, etc. However, it is difficult to identify them precisely unless there are inscriptions or we can compare them based on iconographic and stylistic criteria. In any case, these small precious objects, parva munera, were witnesses to the memory of various games or performances and contribute with their iconography and style to our knowledge of public spectacles in the Roman and early Byzantine empires. They confirm the popularity of the games and spectacles of that era, such as gladiatorial combats, animal fights, horse races, and mime and pantomime performances in theaters. Thank you very much. I am very triste about this problem. I sent my presentation per mail, but I don't know if.
Don't you worry, Angelique.
Okay.
It was a beautiful presentation. We are entertained. So we'll get back to you with questions, of course, at the end of our session. But now we say hi to Hector Williams, who is going to present us bone objects from the University of British Columbia excavation at Anemurium and at Mytilene. Hector, you may proceed. We cannot hear you if you.
Cosa fa?
Excuse me. There we go. No, I sent my presentation to Ergun because I had more confidence in his ability to show things remotely than I could. And also, we do have irregular problems with the internet on Lesbos. So he had both my text and my slides in case. Well, it's a great pleasure. And I feel a bit of a fraud being here because I am not a specialist in bone objects. I have had to learn about them at Anemurium because the director has been ill with dementia for 15 years. So the survivors of the project have taken over to try from our 12 seasons of work at the site. Mytilene, the director there, and the director has the responsibility of publishing everything that nobody else wants to do. And unfortunately, or fortunately, in my case, it was the bone objects because I've learned and I've been very pleased by the generous help I've received from people who work in this field. Endaksi. Beyler ve bayanlar, günaydın. Ladies and gentlemen, hundreds of excavations around the Mediterranean and in Roman Europe have produced thousands of objects made from bone, ivory, horn. There are, however, relatively few detailed and substantial studies of these finds. One is the fine, well-illustrated publication from a group of Israeli excavations at Caesarea in the 90s by Eitan Ayalon. It's his doctoral dissertation. Never too late to do it. I think he was in his 70s when he wrote it. And another is the is the very fine catalog, 4 volumes long, by Dr. Stephen Greep I think is auditing this conference in England, of around 20,000 bone objects in museums and excavations of the Western Roman Empire. And I hope that this conference will encourage people to pursue the thousands that must lie in local collections. I just learned yesterday, for example, that a grave, early Roman grave in Mytilene, had dozens of bone objects in it. Most of my talk will deal with the selection of bone objects from UBC's excavations at Anamurium, the south coast of Turkey. You see it there on the screen. It's that peninsula pointing out into the Pacific, only 60 kilometers away from Cyprus, the southernmost tip of Mediterranean Turkey, in fact, whereas behind it are the remains of the city. On the other side of the screen is modern Mytilene. Unlike Anamurium, completely deserted, Mytilene is a city of 30 to 40,000 people, which creates problems, of course, for archaeological excavation. We've been digging in the castle, which you see on the seaward side of town, and at another site near the North Harbor, both of which have produced bone objects. The next, please. The next image, thank you. You could get a better view of Anamurium here with the remains of a variety of buildings. It was a small place in Hellenistic times. We have some coins of Demetrius Poliorcetes, but most of what we have is Roman, and indeed late Roman. It became part of the Roman Empire in 72 CE, previously had been Commagenian, and was taken from them at that time. Work started there with Professor Elizabeth Rosenbaum-Alfuldi, of whom we've heard earlier. She was a friend of mine, dead these 25 or more years now. But she, of course, incidentally, was working with those theater counters or game counters or whatever they are. And she passed on some 600 of them to one of her graduate students, who herself is now 87, to study and publish. That's another story. You can see where Anamur is there, across from Cyprus on the south coast, a very rugged part of the world with the mountains of the Taurus rising in the background. When we began work in 1970 there were only about 8,000 people in the nearby town. Now there are 80,000. And all those objects you see in the background are gardens covered with plastic sheeting to create hothouses. Well, the work that we did produced a lot of material, theater, Odeon, 3 large sets of public baths, a large palaestra, as well as 350 tombs built like houses outside the city walls. Most of what we found, however, is from the later period of the site, because in 260 CE, the Persians captured much of southern Turkey and the Middle East. And although they didn't destroy the city, they seem to have removed most of the population, and Anamur did not start growing again until into the 4th century. But it was the largest of these Western Cilician towns, and it did pick up again. It's on the major trade routes along the coast, and even appears on the Peutinger tabula, whereas a number of other major south coast Turkish sites do not. The site itself began to grow again in the late 4th century and continued until about 650, when the Islamic assault on Cyprus likely saw the end of urban life at Anamurium. The bone and horn, of course, are everywhere in the ancient Mediterranean. I might mention that neither of our 2 sites has produced any ivory. As a byproduct of the meat markets, the kitchens, and sacrifice, and are useful and easily worked material for a variety of objects. A recent study in the UK suggested 18 different types of object made from bone. We have no partially worked pieces from Anamurium. Unfortunately, the director did not want to keep faunal material, but at Mytilene we kept all our animal and fish and bird material, and we have something like 200 bone and horn pieces, including many blanks and partially worked sections of that material. Most common were bone hairpins and cosmetic implements, but we also found spoons, buttons, spindle whorls, dice, decorative appliques, containers, perhaps for cosmetics or medicines, writing implements, parts of rolls, papyri, and so on. The next, please. We'll see some of the Mytilene bone finds now. What we had there, which produced a lot of this material from, say, 400 to 600, was a substantial resettlement at the site in the 5th and 6th century. I show the large 3rd century palaestra, which was never completed because of the Persian capture of the city. But later on, Byzantine settlers built substantial houses over it. There are 2 of them in the picture there. And the plan on the other side gives you an idea of the extent of the remains. We found 4 churches there and a set of Byzantine baths, small baths. The big baths went out of use after the Persian attack, but the city had several aqueducts and was substantial, as I said. Well, over much of the site, we have an abandonment layer full of a variety of objects, including bone. The next, please. The most interesting of them all, and Ergun will talk more about this because he has more and better ones than we do, is the broken part of a distaff. There were dozens of these from antiquity, even into late antiquity, in this case with an image of Aphrodite Pudica, Aphrodite shielding her breasts and her genitals. Ours must be one of the ugliest and crudest of them all. As you can see, the back from a section of long bone. The back was just sort of flattened, wasn't carved really in the round. The drapery is shown in a very crude way. What is interesting about it, however, are those 4 holes on the front of the breast and shoulders, either where there was an attached necklace or possibly filled with glass paste to give a necklace-like effect. They say these are found all over the place. On the far end of the screen, a pencil drawing of a much larger, I think it's about 13 centimeters high, section of long bone from Caesarea Maritima in Israel, carved into the image of Aphrodite Pudica. By the way, the color slide of our Aphrodite is reversed. Some of you who are very observant may have wondered, why are the arms in a different position? It was a mistake. Next, please. I showed 2 images, the Aphrodite of Menephantos and of Syracuse, Roman copies in different museums that show the kind of image which lasted from the 4th century before Christ until well into the 6th century. One of the longest lasting, I think, sculptural images surviving throughout antiquity, even into the Christian period. Next, please. Just some samples of the work bone that we have, some furniture there, one of the bone discs, a spoon, heaven knows what over on the right-hand side of the screen. But we have between 50 and 75 of these pieces. Next, please. I won't spend time identifying what they are, even if I could, but you've seen some of the so-called theater tokens from an earlier talk. Some call them gaming tokens. We have possible spindle up there in the upper right, but either gaming tokens or even theater tokens. We have a big theater there as well as an Odeon. We have this peculiar object, and I included it because I'm hoping that the experts watching this may be able to tell me what it was. I thought it might be something to do with a stringed instrument, the strings passing through those pairs of bone brackets coming up, but probably not. Anyway, next, please. Got better things to show you. Now, what is really remarkable there, and I only found out about it last week, thanks to Dr. Stephen Greep, who sent me a publication of his that allowed me to suggest that we have remains, and he has found, and his colleagues, Crummy and others, have found 24 of these sets of papyrus holders in cremation and post-cremation deposition in graves around Western Europe. But this is the only one that we have evidence for that I know of in the Eastern Mediterranean. These are ones from Huissen in the Netherlands. And you can see they consist of long tubes, bone tubes, with finials at the end to hold them. They look a bit like modern toilet paper holders, but in fact, they're for papyri. Next, please. One of them was actually found complete in a grave. Here are some other views. The drawings are of ones in the Netherlands. The others are pieces that we found. And I'll skip the furniture parts there since our time is flying. You can see over on the lower left, however, a finial very similar to the one from the Netherlands. Next, please. What were these papyri? Some have suggested literary works, others suggested wills, whatever documentation that might have been needed in a community. This is one coming out of the mud of a grave in the Netherlands, and you can see the bone that made up the holding part of it, the shaft, and at the end there on the right-hand side, almost identical to one we have from Anamurium, is a sort of conical shaped terminus that allowed people to hold on to the roll at either end. This is all very tentative, and I must thank Dr. Greep for sending me the article from a Spanish conference, in fact, which would have been difficult to find otherwise, and to correspond with me on email about it. Next, please. One peculiar object, and again, I hope experts may be able to suggest other possibilities for this, is the object you see there, about 9 centimeters long, 8 or 9 centimeters long, which was pierced at one end, presumably to carry, and has a series of striations cut into it. What I'd like to suggest is that it may be for dipping honey out of containers. One finds them often in wood now in different specialty shops. We do have one beehive and its cover at Anamurium, and the interior of these would have the actual residences for the bees and where the honeycombs would be found. It would be removed, processed, put into smaller containers, and then you could dip it out with this, if I'm correct, which perhaps I'm not, but I'll look forward to advice from anyone watching. Next, please. Now to Mytilene. Mytilene is just off the coast of Turkey, of course. It's been part of Greece since November the 8th of 1912. It's one of the richest islands of the Mediterranean, of the Aegean. It's the third largest, in fact, in Greece after Evia and Crete. And we've been working in Mytilene on the seaward side of the city and near the North Harbor. Very much it is part and parcel of the Roman province of Asia, and its connections are very strong there. A lot of our fine pottery in the early Roman period, for example, comes from Pergamon, which is only 35 kilometers away as the crow flies. Next, please. What we have most thereof, and probably close to 100 of them, between 80 and 100 of them, are hairpins. Now we have hairpins at Anamur as well. Anamur is a modern Turkish name, like the one on the left with, I guess it's a pine cone on the top. It is the only earlier piece than the Persian attack of 260 after Christ. And the tapering nature of it suggests it's from the 2nd or early 3rd century. The pieces that we have from Mytilene, however, are from a large, luxurious Roman villa near the North Harbor, one of a group that were built in the 3rd and late 2nd, 3rd, and into the 4th century there. Ours seems to have fallen on hard times, however, and was converted somewhere in the early 4th century into a building where there were a lot of bone hairpins. There were a lot of drinking cups, over 100 drinking cups in Chandarli ware, and a number of pieces of erotica. So we suggest that it probably became a tavern and brothel, and indeed parts of the courtyard were walled up to make small rooms in it. Around 350, it was destroyed, probably in an earthquake, and never rebuilt or resettled again. An Ottoman cemetery over it ensured the preservation of the structures below, which under the Roman buildings go back to Hellenistic, classical, and archaic, but that's another story. And you can see there some of the bone pins, 3 in the middle, have carving on them. There's a spoon up in the top. It's not a hairpin, and then a very simple, some of these are pierced. We have as well gambling equipment from it, which makes it even more likely to be something like a tavern with gambling and girls available. And here again, there's some interesting objects. We have several dozen pierced astragoloi, knuckle bones, which were used in gambling in the Roman world, and indeed the Greek. They were also used as oracle tokens as well, but that's another story. So again, these clearly were, some of them were polished and were in use for gambling there. We have tokens there, like the die in the center there, which is clearly could be used for gambling or for playing board games. We also have on the far left a token perhaps for one of these games. Next, please. We're almost at the end. I know time is running out. But again, the importance of being able to consult experts, thanks to a conference like this, is very clear with this object. I had never heard of composite dies until 2 days ago, and found this among our bones, and sent a picture off to Stephen Preep, who said, "Oh, you have a composite die," and it's one of the few known from the Eastern Mediterranean. There are dozens, scores of them known from Western Europe. But what they are is a section of bone that's been squared off, had numbers cut into the 6 sides. But then, because there was a hole running through the middle of it, the hole was regularized, and then little discs of bone with the numbers were cut on it. As you can see there, there's a 6 on the top, but they had to put part of the numbers of the 4 spots there where the hole went through. Fortunately, on this one, the bone terminus is preserved at the other end where the 3 was. When I first saw this in my innocence, I thought they were loading the dice with lead so they would fall the way they wanted to. But Stephen pointed out, in fact, this is something just because of the nature of their manufacture of the bones. Next, please, of the dice, I should say. We found some eyelets, bone eyelets, which went into shoes and boots. The Roman one here in the museum in London, showing where it would have gone through. This appears to have been burned and broken, this one here. And one finds these from at least the 6th century before Christ on into the Middle Ages with bone eyelets to protect the leather from thongs going through. Next, please. Now, this is the only interesting piece of bone we found in the castle. There were relatively few bone pieces from the Sanctuary of Demeter we excavated there, but we found 2 bone mice, field mice. I put a modern one down there for comparative sake. And you can see the jaw. It may have been articulated, so it could be open and closed, although I think the hole you see there from the wear patterns beside it was probably for a wheel.
Eccomi qua.
A child's toy that could be pulled across
sì.
the floor.
Tu come stai?
Next, please.
Sì.
I'll skip this quickly. I excavated at Cancri, and in 2007, the ivories and bone onlays were published from there. I've seen very few secondary references to them, so I include them here today just to remind people of their existence. Next, please.
Sì.
They're mid-4th century when the site suffered an earthquake. Going.
Sì.
I only learned about it about 2 years ago. A new system for testing animal bones called zooms. The zoo part of it, of course, is zoomorphic.
Sì.
And it's a new method of
Vabbè,
testing.
però saresti tu vicario al posto di
Some of you
che
may have
avevamo-
used it, but I only learned about it recently. It's an inexpensive analytical technique using a small amount of powdered bone sample to identify the type of animal from which it came. It is especially useful for separating goat and sheep bones, something otherwise almost impossible. The test costs a fraction, $25 or $30, of what traditional DNA analyses cost, $300 or $400. Bovine bones appear to be the most common source of material, but sheep and goats are not unknown. It is quite reliable for genus and at times even for species. There are a lot of questions about some bones, as well as people who always want to make their bone ivory. But this test, when applied on a broad scale, should open up new vistas in the study of ancient bone. Next, please. I'm just ending with something totally different, and it will come up on the screen in a moment. Something that, or maybe it won't come up on the screen. It is an Anglo-Saxon carving in whalebone. Now, what relevance does whalebone have to the Aegean? In fact, whale bones have been found and published from the excavations in the Athenian Agora, so it may well be that this will turn up someday. It's a pleasure to have had this chance to present our material to you, and I'd like to thank Jürgen again for all of his help with it.
So thank you, Hector. Indeed, very, very beautiful material. And because we are at the end of our session, the second session, of this conference. Please, everyone, questions, remarks for our three speakers and for presentation, of course.
Does anyone know if anyone else is working on the bone or ivory counters that we had a paper about? I asked that because Dr. Sheila Campbell, who was one of Elizabeth Alfoldi's PhD students, she published the mosaic floors from Anamurium, was left Elizabeth's big collection to work on and publish. But she herself has not in the best of health and is looking for somebody who might be able to take this on. Elizabeth had hoped that Brett Schneider would publish it, but Sheila's discovered Brett Schneider has lost all interest in these, although they did publish a couple of her earlier studies of the bone counters or theater counters or tokens or whatever they are.
Anna, may I make a little comment
Please,
for
please,
our
please.
colleague, Milanese colleague, Chiara?
Yes,
a little
yes,
comment.
please. Yes.
Very small comment. I wish that Isabel is also listening to us, because I'm wondering if Isabel or Megan did see these tokens in other parts of the Mediterranean. But Chiara, that was an amazing contribution. Thank you very much. Grazie mille. I learned a lot from you. I just want to say those tokens are mostly common here in Turkey in Halikarnassos on the Halikarnasian Peninsula. I have 2 or 3 pieces very similar to yours. So I learned through you that these objects could be produced in Alexandria. So thank you for this convincing provenance of these objects.
Yes, thank you, Ergun.
Hypothesis. This is not, that's why it's very important to proceed with the corpus of all objects. And thank you very much to Professor Hector Williams for, I know that Elizabeth Alfoldi Rosenbaum is the specialist of this kind of objects, is the light for all us. So if possible, I will contact you in privately for information.
Yes, certainly. I'll be happy to.
Thank you very much to.
Thank you for offering.
Professor and to Professor Williams.
If
Very interesting about Elizabeth Alfoldi, because Hector knows it very well, that she was also excavating an Anamurium. Elizabeth Alfoldi Rosenbaum. Hector, is that right?
Correct. She married Andreas Alfoldi and took a double name after that. That she was in her 40s or 50s and he was in his 60s or 70s. So they had a long and happy relationship. She taught at the University of Toronto. But it's interesting how her work at Anamurium began. She was secretary or researcher, I'm not quite sure which, at the Türk Tarih Kurumu, the Turkish Historical Society. And they gave her funding and permission to start work in 1965. And she and an Austrian colleague did a survey and then began digging in 67 and published very short reports. She herself was getting on in years and turned it over to my colleague, James Russell, who unfortunately has dementia. So we've been trying to sort of put the site together. There are large-scale Turkish excavations there now, and it's becoming quite the place. But it is a big problem with material around everywhere in Europe and the Mediterranean, projects that never get finished, or sometimes the publication never gets started. Sinjan was very helpful to a colleague of mine, John Humphrey, who has published the Ottoman tobacco pipes from Mitylene. And it's years ago that he talked to you, probably about 20 years ago, so you may not remember him.
At least.
Yes. But he told us how helpful you been in his work. And we have over 1,500 Turkish tobacco pipes from the 16th to 19th centuries, many of them with inscriptions on them in Ottoman. We've only been able to read one so far because one of our students was Lebanese and read Arabic. She said, "This says chabuk," and chabuk is the modern Turkish word for pipe. I presume it is the Arab word as well. What the other ones are, I don't know, but I've been told by sources in the archaeological service that there are 5,000 of these unpublished and unstudied in the storerooms of the museum at Mytilene.
Maybe I might make an addition when we talk about Elizabeth Alfoldi, about one of the first pioneering female figure in Turkish archaeology, who is Jale İnan, Professor Jale İnan, who was a close friend of Alfoldi. And these both females, these both women, they published a legendary volume, one of the most important volume in Turkish archaeology in the 1960s, 80s, 70s, on the Roman portraits in Asia Minor. So it's nice that we talk about these two legendary names from like 50, 60 years ago. And that we also mentioned about Elizabeth Alfoldi and her important contribution to modern archaeology. Yes.
Yes, Jali Hanım was famous as the only woman classical archaeologist in Turkey for a long time. I only met her once in 1976 at her excavations at what is probably Seleucia near Antalya.
Manavgat, and Side and Perga,
Yes.
of course, several places.
Yes, very close to Side, yeah.
So,
Yeah, I have a little question for Hector.
Please.
The Venus figure that you showed with the necklace, is it possible that the holes are simply for pigment rather than inlays?
Yes, as I say, I've not found any parallels, but I haven't looked very far. I've sort of taken on the bones because nobody else would do them. I'm waiting to get Stephen to do them, but I'm waiting to hear from him. But Ergun is working on much finer ones, which he'll talk about later in the conference, that he has found. There's a remarkable number of added necklaces and other body decoration. There's an exhibition on at the Benaki Museum now in Athens of Hellenistic gold jewelry, but there are at least a dozen large-scale and small Hellenistic terracotta figurines with gilt decoration crisscrossing them or going around their necks or whatever.
Oh, right. Oh, interesting.
I was wondering if the British Museum might not have, Ergun mentioned the ones from Halicarnassus. And of course, Newton brought back endless amounts of material from Halicarnassus, some of which ended up in Vancouver, but that's a whole other story. When the BM in the 50s was giving things away to the colonies. And we got about 40 terracotta figurines from the BM, and the BM has no record of their being deaccessioned.
Yeah, I guess if they weren't accessioned, they'd just be considered duplicates.
Yes, I think that was the case.
That was the practice.
Newton, of course, was vice consul in Mytilene, sent out to obtain material for the British Museum. Ironically, he got virtually nothing from Lesbos, but he did very well on the coast of Turkey and down in the Dodecanese.
So if we have questions for the other three presentation or for Professor Williams.
I might say I love your museum in Constanza. I've been there 4 times
You must come again.
and
You
been
must
to
come again.
Istria. And we have one Romanian archaeologist working with us here at Mytilene. Basilica Lungu is doing our archaic Bucaro.
Vasilica Lungu is one of the oldest and the best friends of the museum in Constanza.
Yes, yeah.
So,
Hello, Anna.
yes.
Hello from Belgrade. Can you hear me?
Hello, yes, of course. Please.
I would like to ask a question to Angeliki.
Please.
Her presentation about the ivory in the Aegean Bronze Age. So, Angeliki, you mentioned the earliest ivory workshops near Astrusia Mountains in Messara Valley. I'm wondering to what period it is assumed to have originated.
Yes, if I remember well, this moment in late Minoan period. I cannot say this moment precisely,
Exactly.
but if I remember well, in late Minoan period.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Other questions, please? Remarks? If we don't have other questions or remarks, I just want to say something for Chiara, that one of her artifacts, it's exactly the same, the image, it's exactly the same with one of with an image from one of the gems belonging to the oldest Romanian collection from the Museum of Brukenthal. And this is for me because until now I didn't know from where this image could be coming, but I'm sure that probably the model are these counters, and these models eventually came to be used also for gems. I could send you the image if you want. It's exactly, it's like an opium jar or something, and we didn't know until now from where. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It's possible also on these game pieces, so pieces, we have often the same images. So the model was repeated also in my pieces, and I imagine also in other. The problem is perhaps to understand who is the sources of these images. If the reproduction on a bone object is later, maybe the production of your gems.
Unfortunately, it's a collectible item, so we don't know from where it was found and how it was brought to the museum. So we don't have other information about that. So
thank you. In any case, we will discuss it, and thank you for this information.
Yeah, thank you. So if we don't have other questions or other remarks, probably it is time for lunch. And we will meet again, Ergun.
Yes, Anna, at
Yes.
1 o'clock, maybe? 1? Is that okay? Yeah, 1 o'clock, lunchtime. We have 45 minutes, I will say, Anna.
Thank you to everyone.
Yes, thank you
See
so
you
much, Anna,
later.
for being such a great chairwoman. Thank you so much. I appreciate it so much. You've
was
done a
easy.
great job, actually. Thank
It
you, Anna.
was easy. It was easy. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. So see you later then.
See you later.
Bon appétit, afiyet olsun.
Teşekkürler.